between Hunter and Lee. But quite how much of that the referee saw, I'm not sure. And it looks to me as if it's broken out again. It's broken out again, and now this time...
I hate him. Those 3 words appeared on millions of lips when Francis Lee's name was mentioned in the 1970s. But the truth isn't that simple. This is the story of a man who survived football's most violent era, where every match felt like a war and every tackle could end a career. Francis Lee had enemies. 5 players in particular seemed to make it their mission to destroy him. But did he truly never forgive them? Or did something deeper happen as the years passed? Before we dive into the feuds, you need to understand the world Lee inhabited. The First Division in the 1970s wasn't just rough, it was lawless. Every successful team had a hard man. Leeds had Hunter and Bremner. Liverpool had Smith. Arsenal had Storey. These weren't just tough players, they were specialists in violence. Their job was to administer physical retribution, to break the spirit of opponents before they could inflict damage on the scoreboard. Lee was 5'8", with a low centre of gravity that made him nearly impossible to dispossess without fouling. He was dynamic and pugnacious. He didn't shy away from contact. He initiated it. He would run directly at defenders, inviting the challenge. In an era where you could legally tackle from behind, Lee's refusal to be intimidated was seen as an existential challenge to the hard man's authority. So they went after him hard. Let's talk about Norman Hunter first, the man they called bites your legs. If Lee had one defining enemy, it was him. November the 1st, 1975, Derby County versus Leeds United. The context was already explosive. Lee had already won a penalty earlier in the match after a challenge by Hunter. The Leeds players were fuming. They believed Lee was a chronic simulator, a diver who conned referees. Hunter felt the injustice of what he saw as a soft penalty. Lee felt the vindication of penalising a player who had kicked him for a decade. As the ball moved away in the second half, Hunter threw a punch, not a push or a shove, a proper right hook, thrown with intent to injure. It split Lee's lips so badly that teammates later said you could poke your tongue through the gash. Most players would have collapsed, would have made sure the referee saw it, not Lee. He stayed on his feet and went after Hunter. Witnesses described it like watching a pit bull savage a Rottweiler. Lee, significantly shorter than Hunter, threw flurries of punches. Both men were sent off by referee Derek Nippard, but the violence didn't stop there. In the tunnel, they went at it again. Lee, consumed by what they called a red mist, had to be physically restrained by teammates and staff, including trainer Gordon Guthrie and teammate Roy McFarland. The hatred in their eyes was visible. This wasn't professional, this was personal. But here's where the real injustice happened. The Football Association reviewed the incident using silent film. They couldn't hear anything. Worse still, reports suggest they didn't even see Hunter's first punch. The camera angle missed it. The cut of the footage obscured the initiation, making it appear as though both men were equally guilty. So Lee got punished heavily for fighting back against an attack he never started. 4 weeks banned and a $250 fine. For a man like Lee, who prided himself on standing up to bullies, being punished for defending himself was a bitter pill. Lee was the victim of the punch and then the victim of the adjudication. For years, it seemed like Lee would never forgive Hunter. The media loved the story. 2 hard men who hated each other, blood enemies. The eternal feud narrative sold newspapers and filled column inches. It was convenient, dramatic, and fitted perfectly with the dirty Leeds mythology that dominated football discourse. But something changed as they got older. They started appearing together at events. The Lee versus Hunter fight became a staple of the after-dinner speaking circuit. They would reference it to entertain audiences, effectively monetising their own history of violence. Hunter even admitted in an interview that he'd seen the little fella since, and he was a smashing bloke. They actually got on quite well. When Hunter died in 2020 from complications related to COVID, Lee's reaction wasn't that of a man holding a grudge. He paid heartfelt tribute. Both men realised they were products of their time. The violence was professional, not personal. Once the boots were hung up, The reason for the hatred evaporated. They became unlikely friends, bonded by shared experience and mutual understanding of what it took to survive that era. So while Lee may never have forgiven the act itself, he undoubtedly forgave the man. Then there was Billy Bremner, the captain of Dirty Leeds. Bremner was different from Hunter. Hunter was the executioner. Bremner was the commander, short, fiery, Scottish, and possessed of an indomitable will to win. In many ways, Bremner was the mirror image of Francis Lee. Both were combative, both refused to be bullied, both would do whatever it took to win. The friction between Lee and Bremner was born of competitive spite. Leeds and Manchester City were the two dominant forces in the north, and Bremner was the gatekeeper Lee had to bypass. Bremner was known for his measured tones of violence, studs down the shin, late tackles disguised as clumsiness, the kind of professional cynicism that stayed just on the right side of a red card. The tension was made worse by the narrative of cheating. Brian Clough, during his disastrous 44-day tenure at Leeds, famously told Bremner and the squad to throw their medals in the bin because they'd won them all by cheating. Lee, who faced Leeds regularly, likely subscribed to this view. He saw Bremner's Leeds as a team that manipulated the rules to their advantage. And here's the irony. Lee was accused of the exact same thing: diving, simulation. Both men were painted with the same brush, just in different colours. Lee was vilified for going down too easily. Bremner was celebrated for his passion and leadership, even when that passion left opponents bloodied. What Lee resented most about Bremner was the immunity. As captain of Dirty Leeds and Scotland, Bremner often escaped the censure that Lee faced for his diving. The double standard gnawed at Lee. Bremner's aggression was lauded. Lee's survival instincts were condemned, but the bitterness faded. Lee came to respect Bremner as a worthy opponent who understood what it took to win in that brutal era. They were warriors on opposite sides, each committed to victory at any cost. Tommy Smith was different. He was the one Lee truly feared. Bill Shankly said Smith wasn't born. He was quarried. Smith didn't just tackle. He hurt people. It was deliberate, calculated. He believed in the psychological destruction of the opponent. He wanted forwards to be looking for him instead of the ball. Fear was the weapon, and Smith wielded it like a master craftsman. In August 1968 at Anfield, Smith and Peter Wall challenged Lee. The photographs from that match capture the essence of the era. Lee on the ball, determined and balanced. Smith engaging in a sliding tackle that was more assault than sporting attempt. The images show raw aggression frozen in time. Smith admitted he wasn't dirty, but when he tackled someone, they must have felt it. That was his philosophy. Make them feel it. Make them remember. Make them think twice before running at you again. Plant the seed of doubt in their mind, so next time they hesitate. Lee later said Smith was one of the players who would have modern hard men crying for their mummy. It's not affection. It's traumatized respect. The respect you give to something that genuinely frightened you. Lee feared Smith more than he hated him, but he never forgave the trauma. Unlike Hunter, Smith never softened. There was no warm reconciliation, no dinner circuit friendship. Lee's relationship with Smith remained distant. Mutual recognition of toughness, but nothing more. No shared laughter about old battles. Just cold acknowledgement. Liverpool's boot room philosophy under Shankly was collective. They hunted in packs. Smith was the enforcer and Lee was the isolated target. That feeling of being hunted created a different kind of unforgiveness that never quite disappeared. Jack Charlton presented a different problem. He was massive. A towering centre-back who used his size like a weapon. Teammates described Charlton as bossing players around like a traffic warden. For someone like Lee, who was fiercely independent, Charlton's authoritarian presence was infuriating. Charlton would bark orders, organise everything, dominate his area with an iron fist. Charlton would clamber all over opponents. He would use illegal leverage, his arms, his height, everything to dominate in the air. Lee, at 5'8", was physically incapable of competing with Charlton in those situations, and Charlton exploited that mismatch ruthlessly. The frustration Lee felt wasn't just about being outmuscled. It was about referees ignoring Charlton's fouls. Because of his reputation as a World Cup winner, Charlton seemed to get away with things other defenders wouldn't. The injustice of it burned. The double standard infuriated Lee to his core. But time changed this feud. Research into the heavy leather footballs of the 1970s linked heading to neurodegenerative diseases. Jack Charlton, like his World Cup winning teammates Martin Peters and Ray Wilson, suffered from dementia. While Lee died of cancer, he belonged to the same generation of guinea pigs. When Charlton died, Lee's family and the city community expressed deep respect. Lee's brother Tommy noted that Jack was everybody's hero. The anger faded into nostalgia and shared loss. They were all victims of the same system, the same era. Finally, there was Peter Storey, the assassin of Highbury. Storey occupied a strange space in Lee's gallery of rivals. He was an opponent, a destroyer, ranked alongside Hunter and Smith as one of the dirtiest players in history. But he was also an international teammate. At club level, Storey was the defensive anchor of Bertie Mee's double-winning Arsenal side. His role was simple: stop the opposition's best player by any means necessary. Lee was a creator and scorer. Storey was a negator. The philosophical chasm between them was vast. But here's where it gets complicated. In a Euro qualifier against Greece in April 1971, Storey provided the cross for a Francis Lee goal. Think about that moment. Lee had to trust Storey as a teammate on Wednesday, knowing Storey would try to kick him out of the game on Saturday. For England, Storey's aggression was an asset to Lee. He was the minder who protected Lee from foreign defenders. It's impossible to fully hate a man who's protected you in hostile environments, even if he's your mortal enemy domestically. Lee's feelings towards Storey were conflicted. Professional enemies, national teammates, two sides of the same coin. The line between hatred and camaraderie blurred every time they pulled on the Three Lions shirt together. Now let's talk about why Lee was targeted so viciously. The nickname, Lee One Pen. In the 1971-72 season, Lee scored 15 penalties, 13 in the league, 1 in the FA Cup, 1 in the League Cup. It set an English record that stood for decades. The nickname, Lee One Pen, morphed into Lee One Pen. The implication was clear. He was winning penalties he didn't deserve. Referee Keith Hackett noted that Lee had a reputation for falling, which meant officials viewed him with scepticism from the opening whistle. This created a dangerous feedback loop. Because referees believed Lee dived, they were less likely to punish genuine fouls against him. This gave defenders like Hunter and Smith a license to increase the severity of their tackles. They knew they could get away with more, but modern analysis tells a different story. Pitches in the 1970s were often mud baths by November. Lee argued that when running at full tilt on mud, even a slight nudge from a defender was enough to destabilise him. He wasn't diving. He was losing his footing due to illegal contact that the referee couldn't appreciate without the fall. Without the theatrics, fouls simply weren't called. It wasn't cheating, it was survival. The only way to protect yourself in a lawless league was to make the violence visible, to force referees to see what they were ignoring. There was also a class element. Lee was a successful businessman while still playing. He ran a waste paper recycling business. He drove a Rolls-Royce. He was flash. The hard men like Smith and Hunter were working-class archetypes who likely resented Lee's wealth. The violence was partly a class-levelling mechanism, bringing the flash striker back down to earth, one brutal tackle at a time. Lee's unforgiveness was rooted in this injustice. He was punished for surviving, vilified for refusing to be broken. So what's the verdict? Did Francis Lee die holding grudges? No, he didn't. Norman Hunter was reconciled. The bloodiest feud of his life ended in friendship and mutual respect. They made peace with the past and found common ground. Jack Charlton was mourned. The traffic warden became a symbol of a lost, glorious era. Lee understood they were both casualties of the same brutal system. Billy Bremner and Tommy Smith were respected. The animosity dissolved into recognition of their shared role in making the First Division the toughest league in the world. Peter Storey was accepted. The duality of rival and teammate blurred the lines of hatred. They were enemies and brothers, depending on the shirt. History has given Lee the sympathy he was denied during his playing days. We no longer see a cheat. We see a brave, dynamic striker operating in a lawless environment, targeted by defenders who were legally permitted to assault him. The dives are now understood as survival instincts in an era where referees offered no protection. Francis Lee didn't die bitter. He died as the last of a specific breed, a man who could take a punch to the face, stitch it up, buy the company that made the bandages, and then have a drink with the man who threw the punch. A warrior who understood that the battles were temporary, but the war was eternal. The unforgiven weren't the players. They were the circumstances, the silent films that missed the truth, the mud-clogged pitches where every step was a gamble, the heavy leather balls that scrambled brains and stole memories, that brutal, beautiful game that gave them everything and demanded payment in blood and broken bones. If you enjoyed this, like and subscribe for more stories from football's wildest days.
I heard that it was going to be a charitable game for Wayne's Foundation. I thought, fantastic, really good. Wayne playing in the States.
Yeah. As I say, you're never sure, because I've never experienced anything like that. And I have regular checks with my union.
Stuart Pearce was a player that many opponents and even teammates absolutely hated. His famous nickname Psycho was celebrated by fans. They saw it as passion, commitment and raw emotion. That visceral roar at Euro 96 became the defining image of his career. The ferocious tackles and the never say die attitude made him a hero. He was the ultimate warrior. But this Psycho moniker was not just a badge of honour, it was a default setting of in-your-face aggression. This fury was not simple passion, it was complex and volatile. It was a trait that led to a career defined by damaging and high-profile conflicts. His aggression did not fade when he hung up his boots. It followed him into management. It poisoned relationships. It destroyed careers. We are going to investigate this psycho spectrum by examining 6 key case files. These are 6 men who were on the receiving end of this aggression. We will start with the players he failed as a manager. Danny Mills was a senior defender at Manchester City. Stuart Pearce was his manager. The relationship between them broke down completely. This breakdown was not quiet. It was public, personal, and devastating. It serves as a foundational case study in Pearce's authoritarian managerial style. The feud began over a fitness dispute. Mills was recovering from a broken leg. The injury was serious. Pearce's own comments confirmed it. He said Mills broke his leg. Scans discovered a hairline fracture. Yet Pearce wanted him to play after only 3 days of training. Mills, a 37-year-old veteran, said he was not ready. According to Mills, Pearce delivered an immediate ultimatum. He told Mills, "You'll never play for me again," and that was the end of it. It's a shocking way to treat a senior player. Do you think a manager should ever speak to a player like that? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you're enjoying this look into football's biggest feuds, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Mills was exiled from the team. He was eventually sent on loan to Hull City. He did not stay quiet. He became a vocal and devastating critic of Pearce's management. Mills launched a comprehensive public critique. He spoke to BBC Radio 5 Live and Final Score. His accusations were not vague. They were specific and targeted. They attacked the core of Pearce's professional competence. Mills said, "Tactically, I don't think he's very good. Motivationally, I think he's poor." He added that Pearce doesn't have the depth of football ability to back it up. As a specific and humiliating example, Mills cited Pearce's decision to put goalkeeper David James up front in a desperate search for a goal. Mills also said Pearce is not a great coach. He's not a great tactician. He's not a great motivator. He suggested Pearce's impact was superficial and temporary. He has this massive impact when he goes in because of his stature, Mills said, and he doesn't always have the substance to back that up. The most critical accusation was about Pearce's inability to manage senior players. Mills claimed Pearce struggles with big players who question his authority. This was the key to the entire feud. Mills himself admitted, "I did question 1 or 2 of the manager's decisions. The team's form had collapsed. They were losing 10 out of their last 11 games." Pearce's public handling of the situation revealed a significant contradiction. While he was allegedly telling Mills privately that his career at the club was over, his public comments were very different. He told the press that Mills must fight as hard as he can to get back into the starting lineup. He said Mills had the same chance as anyone else. He even praised him as a decent professional. This public stance was completely at odds with Mills's claims. When pressed on Mills's criticisms, Pearce's true feelings came out. He made a sarcastic jab that confirmed the dispute was personal. He said, "I do apologise for putting Micah Richards in Mills's place at Manchester City. This feud creates a perfect self-fulfilling prophecy." Mills's core accusation was that Pearce struggles with big players who question his authority. This was proven by Pearce's vindictive reaction to that very questioning. The dispute over authority was the cause of the conflict. The devastating public critique of Pearce's tactics was was the result. Pearce's authoritarian default setting created the very enemy who would most effectively articulate his failings to the world. The conflict with Joey Barton provides a near identical replication of the pattern established with Danny Mills. It reinforces the thesis that Pearce's man management style, when challenged by a big player, was not to manage but to excommunicate. The relationship between Pearce and Barton deteriorated publicly. The flashpoint was Barton's training ground assault on teammate Ousmane Darboe. This led to Barton's suspension and eventual sale to Newcastle United. As with Mills, Barton's primary grievance was not the consequence itself, it was the manner in which Pearce handled the fallout. Barton felt Pearce had violated the professional code by speaking publicly about an internal matter. Barton stated, "We had a relationship breakdown and Stuart Pearce came out and said certain things which he shouldn't have said, whether he felt them or not." Barton's position was clear. When you have a working relationship with someone, there's a lot of things that should be kept in-house. Stuart thinks different. Barton's complaint was validated by Pearce's own public declaration. In breaching the in-house code, Pearce did not simply express disappointment, he delivered a definitive, absolute and public statement of excommunication. Pearce insisted that Barton will never play for a team of mine again. This quote is the smoking gun of a behavioural pattern. This phrase, "never play for me or a team of mine again,"
is functionally identical to the ultimatum Danny Mills alleges he received in private. This verbal tick represents Pearce's managerial kill switch. It is a non-negotiable, permanent, and, in Barton's case, public termination of the professional relationship. This pattern proves that Pearce's management style for complex or challenging personalities was not management at all. It was removal. When faced with a crisis or a challenge to his authority, Pearce's psycho default manifested as an authoritarian kill switch, publicly and permanently severing ties. The infamous confrontation with French defender Basile Boli during Euro 92 provides one of the clearest windows into the psycho persona. It demonstrates that Pearce's aggression was not always mindless rage. Instead, it could be calculated, strategic, and psychologically manipulative. The incident was in fact a three-part cycle of escalating aggression, a cycle that Pearce himself initiated. The first act was a crunching challenge from Pearce on French player Jocelyn Anglemar. In direct retaliation for this challenge, Basile Boli flattened Stuart Pearce. He headbutted him as they jostled at a corner. The violent conduct left Pearce with blood streaming down his face and a bloody cheek. The third act was Pearce's revenge. It is the nature of this revenge that is most revealing. It was not a simple, impulsive act of violence against his attacker. It was a cold, two-pronged response. The physical response was channeled. When England was awarded a free kick minutes later, Pearce unleashed all his rage on the ball. He smashed it against the post or crossbar. The psychological response, however, was far darker. Pearce knew he wouldn't get near Boli again. Therefore, he took matters into his own hands and deliberately targeted the innocent Jocelyn Anglemar, the player he had originally fouled. Pearce accused his opposite winger, rather than Boli, of the attack to put him on the back foot. Pearce later recounted the chilling words he delivered to the terrified Anglemar. Pointing to the cut on his bleeding cheek, he said, "You done that, and I'm going to sort you out for doing it." Pearce admitted that Anglemar, who was in sheer terror, protested his innocence. But Pearce didn't care. The threat was effective. Anglemar was busy for the next 20 minutes denying it was him. This incident provides a definitive portrait of the intelligence behind the psycho persona. Pearce weaponized his own victimhood. Under the guise of red mist, he executed a cold, strategic, and deeply manipulative act of psychological warfare, terrorizing an innocent opponent for strategic gain. The 1994 incident in which Pearce made a racist remark to Paul Ince reveals a profound contradiction in his character. The original incident occurred in December 1994 during a Premier League match between Pearce's Nottingham Forest and Ince's Manchester United. Pearce allegedly made racist comments to Ince, an England international colleague. At the time, the incident was not ignored. Gordon Taylor, the chief executive of the Professional Footballers Association, was involved in resolving the issue originally. Taylor spoke to Pearce, who regrets what he said. This apology was duly offered and accepted. As one report summarised, it happened 18 years ago. Was in the news 18 years ago. Pearce apologised 18 years ago. Ince accepted the apology 18 years ago. The issue was dredged up nearly 2 decades later, in 2012, when Pearce was appointed as England's caretaker manager. Pearce's 2012 reaction to this resurfacing is a case study in public relations deflection. He expressed no fresh contrition for the act itself. Instead, he focused his criticism on the media for bringing it up. He stated, "In some ways, I found it a little bit sad to rehash a story from 17 years ago. He framed both himself and Ince as mutual victims of the press. He said, "I felt sorry for Paul because I know him and his family would have been chased for comments as well." This response skillfully reframed the narrative. It positioned Pearce not as the perpetrator of a racist remark, but as a victim of an opportunistic and sad media cycle. In 2012, Pearce was defended by former teammate Paul Parker. Parker argued the comments would have come out of ignorance, not bigotry. However, in the same breath, Parker offered a counterexample that creates a profound and negative contradiction. Parker recalled a separate incident while playing for England, where an opponent said something racist to Des Walker. According to Parker, the first person to stand up for Des was Stuart. He let this guy know exactly what he thought of him. This defense, intended to be exculpatory, is instead deeply damning. If Pearce was aware enough of racism's toxicity to stand up for Des Walker, his own use of a racist remark against Paul Ince cannot be dismissed as simple ignorance. It suggests the racial slur was deployed as just another weapon in his arsenal of aggression, used to wound an opponent just as he would use a scything tackle. The rivalry between Stuart Pearce and Graham Lasso for the England left-back position appears to be the great exception to the rule. However, a deeper analysis reveals it to be a control case. Pearce's professionalism in this single instance provides the final, crucial piece of evidence needed to understand his confrontational nature. When Terry Venables took over as England manager in 1994, he swept a new broom. Venables identified Blackburn Rovers' Graham Lasso as his first choice. In one of his first phone calls to Pearce, Venables was direct. He said, "Lasso is going to be my left-back." This was a direct challenge to Pearce's status. Yet his response was a model of complete professionalism. Instead of reacting with anger or ego, Pearce told Venables, "Fine, but if you think I'm good enough, I'll stay with the squad and help him." This professionalism culminated in a significant symbolic act. In what Lasso later described as a small training ground ceremony, Pearce personally presented Lasso with the number 3 shirt before his debut. Lasso stated that, "Pearce told me that I deserved it on merit and he was really gracious." Pearce dutifully sat on the bench and watched Lasso play until December 1995, when fate intervened. Lasso suffered a catastrophic injury, a broken leg and dislocated ankle. Pearce, given his opportunity, made the most of it and went on to have his iconic redemptive tournament. This incident seems to contradict the negative thesis of a career defined by conflict. It doesn't. It reinforces it. Pearce's professionalism with Lasso serves as the control case that proves his authoritarian meltdowns with Mills and Barton were choices, not inevitabilities. The critical question is why his reactions were so different. The answer lies in the source of the challenge. With Lasso, the decision came from above, from the manager, Terry Venables. This was an authority Pearce respected and was institutionally bound to accept. With Mills and Barton, the challenges came from below, from subordinate players. This distinction is crucial. It proves Pearce was capable of handling professional disappointment with grace and professionalism. His inability to do so with Mills and Barton is therefore an even more damning indictment. It was not a lack of ability to be professional, it was a lack of willingness. The infamous incident involving Derby County's Ted McMinn is perhaps the purest, most unfiltered, and most bizarre example of the psycho default in action. It provides a glimpse into the primal end of the psycho spectrum. The incident occurred during the famously heated East Midlands derby between Nottingham Forest and Derby County. In one such encounter, Pearce clattered into Ted McMinn. As the two players lay in a heap on the floor, Pearce committed the notorious act. This is not a matter of media legend or speculation. It is anchored by Pearce's own reported admission. As one report bluntly states, "I bit him right on the nipple." This was the default setting of in-your-face aggression, manifesting in a primal, shocking, and indefensible physical assault. Like the Bowley incident, this aggression did not exist in a vacuum. It created lingering bad blood. More importantly, it initiated a self-sustaining cycle of violence, of which Pearce was the sole architect. Pearce knew his action would have a consequence. He knew that McMinn was likely to seek revenge when the two teams met again at the start of the 1989-1990 campaign. His solution was not to defuse the situation, but to escalate it preemptively. Pearce decided to get his retaliation in first by scything the Derby player virtually in two. This creates a perfect negative narrative loop. Pearce commits a bizarre and aggressive act, the bite. He then uses the assumed future consequence of his own action as justification for a new act of aggression, the scything tackle. He is the sole creator and perpetrator of this entire cycle. This incident reveals the psycho default in its purest and most indefensible form. The 6 case files presented, when synthesized, form an undeniable and career-long pattern of behavior. These are not a series of isolated, coincidental, or heat-of-the-moment events. They are the consistent, predictable outcomes of a single, unifying default setting of aggression, a psycho-spectrum that defined Stuart Pearce's career. The analysis confirms the negative thesis. The aggression manifested in every conceivable arena. The bite on Ted McMinn stands as the baseline, a raw, physical and bizarre act. The calculated, psychological terrorizing of the innocent Jocelyn Anglemer proves the psycho persona was an intelligent, manipulative and cold-blooded tool. The 1994 racist remark to Paul Ince demonstrates that when the default setting was triggered, even deeply held principles could be overridden, and a racial slur deployed as a weapon. The feuds with Danny Mills and Joey Barton show how this psycho default translated directly into a failed management style. The kill switch phrase, "never play for me again," is the administrative equivalent of a scything tackle, an absolute punitive and destructive act that brooks no dissent. The Graham Lasso case serves as the final damning piece of evidence. It proves that Pearce's professionalism was entirely contingent. He was capable of grace when his position was challenged by a respected superior, but that professionalism vanished, replaced by the psycho default the moment his personal authority was questioned by a subordinate. Ultimately, the psycho persona was not a simple badge of a hard man. It was a complex, multifaceted and destructive default setting that defined one of football's most controversial and damaging careers. For a man worshipped as Liverpool's king, Kenny Dalglish sure made a lot of enemies. Not the kind you make by accident. These were calculated, cold-blooded betrayals. 5 men felt the sting of Dalglish's loyalty when it suited him, and his ruthlessness when it didn't. This isn't a story about petty grudges. This is about power, pride, and the dark side of a legend. Let's uncover the 5 relationships that exposed Kenny Dalglish for who he really was. Graham Souness, the friend turned rival. Start with the most painful one. Graham Souness wasn't just Dalglish's teammate. He was his roommate. For years, these 2 Scottish warriors shared hotel rooms across Europe, winning everything there was to win. Souness was the enforcer in midfield. Dalglish was the creator up front. Together, they built Liverpool's most dominant era. But their relationship was never smooth. Souness himself admitted they had 1,000 arguments while rooming together. 1,000. That's not friendship. That's friction barely held together by success. Think about what that means. Most people don't have 1,000 arguments with their enemies. But Souness and Dalglish, they fought constantly about tactics, about teammates, about everything. Their bond was prickly from the start, and that tension was always going to explode eventually. When Dalglish shocked everyone by resigning as Liverpool manager in February 1991, he left the team 3 points clear at the top and still in the FA Cup. Nobody saw it coming. The pressure of Hillsborough had broken him. He walked away from a winning team, and into that void stepped Graham Souness. Liverpool called, Souness answered. One legend replaced another. But what Souness did next destroyed everything Dalglish had built. He didn't just take over, he tore it apart. Souness saw rot where others saw glory. He believed the senior players Dalglish left behind lacked passion and cared too much about money. So he started swinging the axe. His managerial style was authoritarian, dictatorial, ruthless. He dismantled the boot room philosophy that had made Liverpool great for decades. That sacred system of continuity and loyalty. Souness threw it in the bin. He questioned Dalglish's transfer policies openly. He even sold Peter Beardsley, a key part of Dalglish's legendary 1987-88 title-winning side, to cross-city rivals Everton. That wasn't just bad business. That was a statement. Souness was saying everything Dalglish did was wrong. Every decision, every signing, all of it needed destroying and rebuilding from scratch. And he failed. Spectacularly. Souness's reign is remembered as the moment Liverpool got knocked off their perch. His transfer market moves were disasters. His revolution flopped in the most public way possible. Years later, Souness admitted his management soured his relationship with Liverpool supporters forever. But the damage to Dalglish's legacy was already done. Souness saw cracks appearing in Dalglish's final years and tried to fix them by burning the house down. But all he did was prove that Dalglish's methods were right all along. The professional distance between them was ideological. Souness rejected everything Dalglish stood for, and Dalglish never forgave him. His closest friend had taken everything he built and declared it worthless. Patrice Evra.
the enemy by association. Now let's talk about the Luis Suarez saga, because this is where Dalglish's blind loyalty turned him into something ugly, something paranoid. Patrice Evra never did anything to Kenny Dalglish, but Dalglish made Evra his enemy anyway. Why? Because Evra accused Luis Suarez of racial abuse in October 2011. The FA investigated. The hearing concluded the charge was proven. Suarez got an 8-match ban and a £40,000 fine. Case closed, right? Not for Dalglish. Dalglish went to war. Total war. He became angry in press conferences, visibly furious. He was irritated by persistent questioning from journalists who dared to suggest maybe his player had done something wrong. He actively fanned the flames. He turned it into an us-against-the-world battle, Liverpool versus everyone. And Dalglish positioned himself as the general. When the squad wore T-shirts supporting Suarez during the warm-up at Wigan in December, it was bizarre and misjudged. The optics were terrible, but Dalglish defended it. Aggressively, he insisted the players hadn't caused any trouble. He was in complete denial because supporting Suarez was the only thing that mattered. The racism charge, irrelevant. The victim, irrelevant. Only Suarez mattered. Then came the handshake snub. When Suarez returned from his ban, he refused to shake Evra's hand before the match at Old Trafford. The cameras caught it. The world saw it. And Dalglish's post-match interview was a disaster. He was robust, controversial, dripping with paranoia and blind bias. He tried to shift blame to the media. He doubled down on his pig-headed denials. He acted like Liverpool were being persecuted. Liverpool's American owners, Fenway Sports Group, had seen enough. They forced Suarez and Dalglish to apologise immediately. Dalglish was humiliated publicly. He issued an apology admitting he did not conduct himself in a way befitting a Liverpool manager. Those words must have burned, because Dalglish didn't believe he'd done anything wrong, but the damage was done. Dalglish's defence of Suarez was so total, so illogical, so obsessive that it critically undermined anti-racism efforts. It brought the club into disrepute. And Patrice Evra? He was just collateral damage in Dalglish's siege mentality. Evra became the other, the enemy, simply because he stood in the way of Dalglish's blinding loyalty to one player. Evra didn't matter as a person, as a victim. He was just an obstacle. If you think that was harsh, wait till you see how he turned on players who once worshipped him. Before we go there, let me know in the comments. Do you think loyalty in football even exists anymore? And of course, subscribe so you don't miss the next story. Steven Gerrard, captain who lost faith. Steven Gerrard loved Kenny Dalglish, wanted him as Liverpool's permanent manager, publicly campaigned for it, called their bond a marriage blessed in heaven. Dalglish was his hero, but the Suarez saga broke that marriage. It exposed the limits of Dalglish's leadership. And it showed everyone that even the captain had doubts. Before the handshake scandal, Gerrard spoke publicly. He said he would speak to Suarez. His advice would be to shake hands and move on. That was pragmatic. That was smart. Gerrard understood that the longer this dragged on, the worse it would get. He wanted to end it, but that was the exact opposite of what Dalglish was doing. Dalglish was defiant, combative, obsessed with defending Suarez at all costs. Refused to back down. He refused to compromise. The gap between manager and captain was growing. Even Liverpool's rivals noticed. Sir Alex Ferguson called Dalglish's support of Suarez ridiculous. Ferguson believed the mishandling of the entire affair was a significant factor in Dalglish's eventual sacking. He was right, because in April 2012, during a loss to Newcastle, the world saw the symbolic collapse of Dalglish's authority. When goalkeeper Pepe Reina got sent off, Dalglish marched onto the pitch and Gerrard shooed him off it, literally waved him away, a captain telling his manager to back off, in front of thousands of fans, in front of cameras broadcasting to millions. That moment was everything, showed a manager who had lost control of his owners, the narrative and his own captain. Gerrard, the loyal servant, club legend, the man who bled Liverpool red, had publicly undermined his manager. Not because he wanted to, but because he had to. Because Dalglish's obsessive defence of one player had cost him the respect of everyone else. And Ferguson was right. It contributed directly to his dismissal in May 2012. Andy Carroll, £35 million betrayal. Andy Carroll was supposed to be Dalglish's marquee signing. £35 million. Club record. January 2011. Dalglish backed him publicly, shielded Carroll from media criticism. When England manager Fabio Capello publicly questioned Carroll's fitness and said he needs to drink less, Dalglish defended him. Fiercely, he took responsibility, claiming the club put too much pressure on Andy. Dalglish was loyal, or so it seemed. Carroll struggled. The goals didn't come easily. Dalglish kept backing him. In press conferences, he dismissed the criticism. He insisted it was unfair. Carroll time. Publicly, it looked like Dalglish was standing by his man. 1 year later, January 2012, the truth came out. Liverpool offered Andy Carroll to Manchester City in a straight swap for Carlos Tevez. No negotiation, no warning, and here's the worst part. It was done without the knowledge of Carroll or his representatives. Carroll found out through the media. His own club had tried to get rid of him behind his back. Manchester City's Brian Marwood rejected the proposal immediately, but the damage was done. All those public defences, lies. All that loyalty, fake. Dalglish had been protecting his own reputation, not Carroll's career. When the story broke, Dalglish denied everything, dismissed the confirmed reports as speculative. He insisted Carroll was very happy, but sources confirmed Carroll's camp was unimpressed. Anfield's source was quoted saying players like Andy have not adapted to the Liverpool way. Translation? We don't want him anymore. Carroll's frustration became public. He stormed down Newcastle's tunnel, swearing. After being substituted in April 2012, the relationship had completely broken down, and when Dalglish was sacked, Carroll was shooed out the door just as unceremoniously. Carroll was loaned out, then sold. The £35 million mistake. The friction was duplicity. Dalglish publicly defended his record signing while privately trying to dump him for Tevez. That's not loyalty. That's managerial ruthlessness disguised as protection. Carroll was a disposable asset, and when he stopped being useful, Dalglish tried to get rid of him behind his back. No conversation, no honesty, just betrayal. John Aldridge, the echo from the past, is where it gets really ugly. Because Dalglish did this before, and he did it to someone who loved Liverpool more than anyone. John Aldridge was a boyhood Liverpool supporter, a lifelong Red. Dalglish sold Ian Rush to Juventus in 1987. He signed Aldridge as his replacement. The dream came true, and Aldridge delivered. He was prolific, record-breaking. He spearheaded the 1987-88 title-winning team, 29 goals in his first full season, 31 in his second, 63 goals in 104 appearances. He was a machine. Fans loved him. He was one of them. A Scouser. Red. Living the dream. But in the summer of 1988, Dalglish re-signed Ian Rush from Juventus. Rush's time in Italy hadn't worked out. He wanted to come home. Dalglish wanted him back. Old partner, his friend, and suddenly John Aldridge was expendable. Aldridge believed he could play with Rush and Peter Beardsley, but in an era of fewer substitutions, Dalglish had to choose. He chose Rush. Aldridge was prized out and sold to Real Sociedad in September 1989. Just like that, the 31-goal-a-season striker was gone. And here's the part that hurts. Aldridge was treated awfully. In his own words, Dalglish never gave him a reason for doing so, never explained, never justified, never even had the courtesy to sit him down and tell him why, just discarded him like 63 goals meant nothing. Aldridge later said it hurt a lot when he left. This was his dream, and Dalglish crushed it without explanation. Aldridge argued you don't sell someone who has scored 31 goals a season. He was right. Unless you value old friendships more than current form, unless you care more about nostalgia than performance. And Aldridge was bitter, very bitter, for a long time. This was about Dalglish's loyalty to his original partner, overriding any sentiment for his current star. Rush was Dalglish's friend, his old teammate. So Aldridge, the Scouser, the boyhood fan, prolific scorer, had to go. No explanation, no apology, just gone. Replaced by the past. Aldridge didn't lose his place because he wasn't good enough. He lost it because he wasn't Ian Rush. So what do we make of all this? These weren't accidents. These were the defining traits of Kenny Dalglish's managerial character. Blinding loyalty that became self-destructive. Cold ruthlessness that left players bitter and betrayed. An ideological battle for legacy that fractured friendships. The Suarez saga showed his loyalty at its worst. He created a dispute with Evra by proxy. He damaged his authority with his owners. He lost the faith of his captain. Aldridge and Carroll cases showed his ruthlessness. He was willing to discard fan favourites, prolific scorers, his own record signings, without explanation. Players became disposable assets. And Souness? That was a prickly friendship fractured by a failed revolution. Souness tried to dismantle the dynasty Dalglish built. The legend of King Kenny was built on loyalty. It was destroyed by it too. His inability to separate pride from principle, loyalty from logic, left a trail of broken relationships. These 5 men all felt the consequences of Dalglish's contradictions. And in 2012, when Liverpool sacked him, it felt like poetic justice, the moment the king lost his crown. So what do you think? Was Kenny Dalglish's downfall the cost of being too loyal or too ruthless? Drop your thoughts below and make sure you're subscribed. We've got more untold football feuds coming soon.
Probably the greatest goalkeeper ever.
Yeah?
Yeah.
What would it be worth in today's transfer market? Over 100 mil.
Yeah, exactly.
Met the great man himself. He just called me Bill. What a great player, but also what a great fella he was. Papers one morning, I read Pat Jennings might be available for transfer. The worst day of my life, couldn't believe it.
Pat Jennings is seen as a universal legend, loved by both Arsenal and Tottenham. But what if that nice guy persona was all an act? What if he was fake? He is the rare breed of player idolised by both sides of the North London rivalry. But behind the calm exterior, his career was marked by intense, bitter moments. We found a list of 6 players Pat Jennings supposedly absolutely hated. Today, we're digging into this hate list to find the truth. Let's start with Alex Stepney. The date was August 12, 1967. The stage was Old Trafford. The event was the Charity Shield, pitting Manchester United against Tottenham Hotspur. This was the traditional season opening contest, a highly anticipated match between the league champions and the FA Cup winners. The game would end in a 3-3 draw, with both clubs sharing the trophy. But this match is remembered for one moment above all others. It remains the only time a goalkeeper has scored in the Shield's history. Early in the game, Jennings took the ball in his hands. He launched a massive punt downfield from his own penalty area. Some described it as a 120-yard drop kick. The ball travelled the length of the pitch. It took a freak bounce in front of Alex Stepney, the embarrassed keeper at the other end. The ball sailed over Stepney's head and nestled into the net. The goal was so unprecedented that it caused confusion. Commentator Kenneth Wolstenholme took half a minute to work out what had happened before shouting that Jennings had scored. For Stepney, it was a moment of pure, unavoidable professional humiliation. The match featured legends like Bobby Charlton and Dennis Law, but none of their goals are remembered like this one. It was a freak accident that defied all logic and probability. In the history of football, goalkeeper goals are rare enough, but for one keeper to score against another from his own box, with a simple clearance that takes a wicked bounce, is virtually unheard of. So did Jennings hate him for this? At all? The evidence shows the exact opposite. Jennings referred to his counterpart with pure sympathy, calling him poor old Alex. This is the goalkeeper's code. It's empathy for a fellow keeper's humiliation. Goalkeepers share a unique understanding of the loneliness and vulnerability of their position. They are the lone eagles of the pitch. They understand the bizarre misfortunes that can befall them in ways that other players simply cannot. When asked what Stepney said to him, Jennings replied that he couldn't repeat what he said. This wasn't a threat. It was exasperated, humorous disbelief from a fellow professional who had just been publicly embarrassed by a one-in-a-million freak occurrence. The relationship was not defined by hate, but by a shared, empathetic joke about one of football's most bizarre goals. It's one of football's most bizarre goals, but it sounds more like a shared joke than bitter hatred. What do you think is the strangest goal in football history? Let me know in the comments below. And if you're enjoying this look into football's hidden rivalries, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss our next video. Let's move to Ray Kennedy. This was not a bizarre comedy. This was pure professional tragedy. The date was May 3rd, 1971, the final day of the league season. Arsenal travelled to White Hart Lane, needing a win or a 0-0 draw to win the league title. They trailed Leeds United by 1 point. Due to the complexities of goal average, only those 2 results would secure the championship. A score draw would hand the title to Leeds. The atmosphere was beyond tense. A crowd of 51,992 crammed into the stadium. Tottenham were determined to deny Arsenal the chance to emulate their double from 10 years earlier. They were desperate to prevent the ultimate humiliation of their rivals winning the title on their sacred turf. Stakes could not have been higher. This was the North London derby at its most intense, the League Championship hanging in the balance. For 87 minutes, Tottenham and Pat Jennings held their rivals at bay. Jennings was in splendid form. He produced first-class saves. He denied John Radford with a brilliant stop. Tottenham had their keeper to thank on numerous occasions for keeping the match scoreless. A 0-0 result would have been enough for Arsenal to win the title, but at least it would have denied them the glory of a winning goal at White Hart Lane. Jennings was putting on a masterclass performance. Every save brought roars from the home crowd. Every Arsenal attack was met with desperate defending and world-class goalkeeping. Then, in the 88th minute, disaster struck. An Arsenal attack saw John Radford's shot blocked. George Armstrong retrieved the ball and chipped it back across the goal. The 19-year-old Ray Kennedy climbed to head past Jennings via the underside of the bar. The goal was an incredible finale for Arsenal. For Jennings and Tottenham, it was the ultimate professional devastation. The last 3 minutes were a formality. The whistle blew. Pandemonium erupted as Arsenal's players and fans celebrated winning the championship on the sacred turf of their rivals. What better place than White Hart Lane, the commentary noted. Did Jennings hate Kennedy? No. There is no evidence of any personal animosity between the two. Hate here was purely for the situation. It was for the traumatic, gut-wrenching result, not the player. Pain was so palpable that even Kennedy, the hero, felt it. Kennedy said later that it was the longest 3 minutes he had ever known. As Tottenham came back, he remembered thinking that perhaps it might have been better had his header not gone in. The proof of no personal animosity came 6 years later. In 1977, Jennings would make the shocking move to Highbury, play alongside some of those former rivals, including men who had been part of that 1971 squad. That he could make this transition and be welcomed demonstrates his ability to separate the agonising results of on-field combat from the men he competed against. This 1971 match was his biggest connection to Arsenal at the time. It was a professional trauma. Hate was for the loss, not the player. Next, we have George Wood and John Lukic. This hate wasn't from external rivals. It came from teammates who were brought in to replace him. The cases of these two goalkeepers are different from the others. They demonstrate a unique kind of professional pressure. When Jennings moved to Arsenal in 1977, Tottenham believed he was nearing the end of his career. He proved them wrong, becoming a Highbury stalwart. But by 1980, Arsenal began planning for the future. They signed George Wood from Everton as a possible replacement. For a year, Wood served as the second choice keeper. The dynamic changed in January 1982. Jennings was injured. Wood stepped in to deputise for the injured Irishman. Wood's performances were not those of a temporary stand-in. Such was the quality of his performances that he remained number one. For nearly a full year, Jennings, the legend, found himself out of favour as Wood claimed the starting spot. Wood's form was so strong that he was selected for the Scotland squad for the 1982 World Cup. This was not a personal feud. It was pure professional competition, which Wood was winning on merit. However, Jennings's career was not over. Displaying the marvellous temperament he was known for, didn't complain. He didn't agitate or cause problems in the dressing room. He bounced back and regained his starting place by December 1982. Wood, having lost the battle, was transferred to Crystal Palace in 1983. This first challenge was a warning shot, a reminder of his professional vulnerability, but one that Jennings ultimately and impressively overcame. It showed his mental strength and determination, but the battle with time was relentless. In July 1983, Arsenal signed John Lukic from Leeds United for £75,000. Unlike Wood, Lukic was not a possible replacement. He was signed with the clear intent of replacing the goalkeeping dignitary. Even then, the transition wasn't immediate. Jennings held on, but the pressure was mounting. In March 1984, injury to Jennings gave Lukic a run of 4 games. The definitive turning point came on Halloween night 1984. Jennings, a League Cup match away to Oxford United, played horrifically poorly. Arsenal was knocked out. A single horrific performance was the catalyst. Jennings was set aside. He briefly stole the goalkeeping gloves back for 3 more fixtures, but Lukic came back into the team and became a constant fixture. Jennings played his final league game for Arsenal on November 25, 1984, against Sheffield Wednesday. He had been eventually replaced by John Lukic as the first choice keeper. Process was merciless. This wasn't about hate. It was the merciless but inevitable succession that every athlete faces. Process was purely professional. The lack of hate is proven by what happened next. Jennings was not cast out. He was given a farewell match at Highbury, fittingly against Tottenham, in May 1985. Furthermore, he was welcomed back to Tottenham, who allowed him to train with their reserves to maintain his fitness for the 1986 World Cup. Hate wasn't for Wood or Lukic. It was a battle with his own ageing body, a fight every athlete eventually loses. Both Wood and Lukic were simply doing their jobs, trying to establish themselves as number 1 keepers. Now let's talk about Mario Kempes. This name on the hate list is the most fundamentally flawed. It represents a complete inversion of the facts. The setting was the 1980 European Cup Winners' Cup final at the Heysel Stadium in Brussels on May 14, 1980. It was a moment of double heartbreak for Arsenal. The match came just 4 days after their nightmare at Wembley. Shocking 1-0 defeat to second-tier West Ham in the FA Cup final. This was their last chance to salvage a trophy from a gruelling 67-match campaign. Their opponent was Valencia, a formidable side managed by Alfredo Di Stefano. They featured the World Cup winning striker Mario Kempes. Kempes was a known threat. Jennings had been forced to deny him with a sharp save earlier in the match. After a draining 120 minutes, the match ended 0-0. It would be the first European final ever decided by a penalty shootout. The pressure was unimaginable. Arsenal had already lost one final that week. They could not afford to lose another. Mario Kempes, as Valencia's star player, stepped up to take the first crucial penalty. Hate premise suggests a moment of failure or humiliation for Jennings. This is where the hate premise collapses. Jennings, facing the World Cup winner, guessed correctly. Photograph of the moment is iconic. Jennings saved the first spot kick. He won his personal one-on-one duel with the star striker. In the individual battle that defines a penalty, Jennings was victorious. This was a moment of personal triumph, not a source of hate. The hate, or more accurately, the heartbreak from that night came because Jennings was unable to stop the rest of Valencia's penalties. Arsenal's own Liam Brady and Graham Rix both failed to convert their kicks. Arsenal lost the shootout. The query confuses team failure with individual interaction. Jennings did his job. He won his personal battle with Kempes. Any negative emotion from that night would be directed at the collective failure, the exhaustion of the 67-game season, and the pain of losing 2 finals in 4 days. It would absolutely not be directed at the star striker, whose penalty he heroically saved. Far from being a figure of animosity, Kempes was a world-class opponent whom Jennings personally bested in one of the highest pressure moments of his career. Finally, we come to Brian Clough. The rivalry with manager Brian Clough is the definitive proof against the hate premise. Clough, the iconic Nottingham Forest manager, had a well-documented obsession with Jennings. He would curse the goalkeeper for being unbeatable every time his team played against him. Their rivalry is crystallised in one of football's most famous anecdotes. The story has been retold by many, including Stuart Pearce, who heard it from Jennings himself. The setting was a match at Nottingham Forest's City Ground in 1978 or 1979. Jennings, playing for Arsenal, went to take a goal kick at the notoriously volatile Trent End. As he placed the ball, a supporter threw a dart out of the crowd. It stuck in his forearm. Jennings' reaction was typical of his marvellous temperament. He didn't make a big deal of it. He simply pulled it out of his arm, put it in his glove bag, and, at half-time, calmly asked his manager for some antiseptic. His manager, Don Howe, was outraged, went to see Clough after the game, furiously complaining about the disgrace of his fans physically assaulting the goalkeeper. Clough at the time was reportedly a little bit non-committal. The true nature of the rivalry was revealed 2 or 3 days later. A letter arrived on Nottingham Forest notepaper. The content was pure, unadulterated cloth. It read, "Dearest Pat, I have absolutely no sympathy for you whatsoever. Every time you come to the City ground, you stop everything. It is no surprise to me you stopped the dart on this occasion. Lots of love, Brian. This letter is the antithesis of hate. It's the highest form of respect, delivered via sarcastic genius. Clough, by making a joke of it, simultaneously diffused a dangerous assault and paid his rival the ultimate compliment. He was saying that Jennings was so unbeatable that not even a projectile dart was a surprise. The final, irrefutable proof? For years afterward, Pat Jennings carries this letter around with him in his breast pocket. You don't cherish and proudly display a memento from a man you absolutely hated. It was a treasured item from a revered antagonist. So was Jennings fake? No. Hate list is a complete misinterpretation. The list wasn't about animosity. Stepney was empathy, a perfect expression of the goalkeeper's code. Kennedy was agony over the result, not the man who scored. Wood and Lukic were the battle with time. The inevitable displacement by younger talent that Jennings handled with professional dignity. Kempes was a personal triumph, a penalty save that Jennings won in his individual duel, and Clough was humorous. Profound respect wrapped in wit. The 80-year-old Storey isn't one of hate. He is the only man idolised by supporters of both Tottenham Hotspur and Arsenal, a status that proves his career was defined by universal acclaim, not animosity.